Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariva Jakacharya Asto Tarasata Shri Śrīmad His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON BB Founder-Acharya, save the whole world, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa. Parivrajaka Asto Tarasata Shri Śrīmad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki. Namacharya Sarayas Thakur Ki. Premzagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasarigora Bhaktivedanta Ki. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gogovana Shamakun. Radha Kun Girigovana Ki. Brajbhumi Shivindamana Ki. Navdi Maipur Damaki, Purusham Chetra Jadapuri Damaki, Gangamayaki, Jamunamayaki, Bhakti Deviki, Tulasi Maharaniki, Samaveta Bhaktivindaki, Jainitai Go Premanandi. All glory to some bodies, all glory to some bodies, all glory to some bodies, all glory to some bodies. Sri Guru Sri Guru, all glory to Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Qua Deho Bhautiko Anatma. Qua Deho Bhautiko Natma. Qua Deho Bhautiko Natma. Qua Chatma Prakrite Para. Qua Chatma Prakrite Para. Kvachatma Prakrite Para. Kvadeho Bhotiko Natma. Kvachatma Prakrite Para. Kasha Ke Pati Putradya. Kasha Ke Pati Putradya. Kasha Ke Pati Putradya. Moha Eva Hi Karanam. Moha Eva Karanam. Moha Eva Hi Karanam. Kashake Patiputradya. Moha Eva Hi Karanam. Kwadeho Bhotiko Natma. Kvachatma Prakrite Para. Kashake Patiputradya. Moha Eva Hi Karanam. Kwadeho Bhotiko Natma. Kvachatma Prakrite Para. Kashame Patiputradya. Moha Eva Hi Karanam. Moha Eva Hi Karanam. Vaishnavis? Kva, where is? Deha, this material body. Bhotika, made of 5 elements. Anatma, not the spirit soul. Kva, where is? Cha, also. Atma, the spirit soul. Prakrite, to the material world. Para, transcendental. Kasya, of whom? Ke, who is? Pati, husband. Putra adaya, or son, and so on. Moha, illusion. Eva, indeed. He, certainly. Karanam, cause. So even from the word for word here we can get quite a good idea of what this verse is about. Basically, Karma is explaining that the material body is not the self. And the son, the husband, all these things, these are all temporary relationships, and it's all coming from moha. It's all coming from illusion, this misconception. Translation. Kashyapa Muni continued, what is this material body made of 5 elements? It is different from the spirit soul. Indeed, this word kwa means what? Indeed, the spirit soul is completely different from the material elements from which the body is made. But because of bodily attachment, one is regarded as husband or son. These illusory relationships are caused by misunderstandings. Responsively, please. Kashyapa Muni continued. What is this material body? Made of 5 elements. It is different from the spirit soul. Indeed, the spirit soul is completely different from the material elements from which the body is made. But because of bodily attachment, one is regarded as husband or son. These illusory relationships are caused by misunderstanding. So, very, very strong statement, but also very straightforward, simple statement that Kashyapa Muni is making here. To Aditi. And explaining how the self is completely different from the body, but due to ignorance, this avidya, we're thinking that the body is the self. And Prabhupada sometimes would give the analogy of just like, if you look at, of course it's different these days, but it used to be like when you had a movie, it was on what they call celluloid strip, and it was a series of photographs on the strip. I don't know if you've ever seen how cartoons are made. It's just like a series of drawings, and each drawing changes a little bit. And you can try and experiment. If you get a book, like a notebook, and in the corner you drew like a stick figure, and in the stick figure you have that you go through the progression of walking, and you just flick how you flick the page, and just like you scan through the pages, and it looks like the stick figure's walking. And this Prabhupada uses this analogy to describe the nature of the self in the body. It's actually an illusion. It's just like this stick figure walking is just a series of still drawings. But if you flick it through the pages like that, it looks like it's walking. It's just illusion. And so in the same way, the self looks like the body because of the workings of the material nature, because the way the material nature covers us over. But in actuality, the self is not the body. The body is just matter. And this is, this Prabhupada explains this really nicely in the purport. The spirit soul, this is Prabhupada's purport, the spirit soul, Atma or Jiva, is certainly different from the body, which is a combination of 5 material elements. This is a simple fact, but it is not understood unless one is spiritually educated. It's actually a very simple understanding. Because we can see that, it's like, what's the difference between a dead body and a live body? The scientists say, well, the dead body's moving, the live body's moving, the live body can do things. But if that's all it is, if it's just a simple thing, if it's just an electrical charge that's missing, plug it into the PowerPoint, make it work again. They can't do that. They can't make the body work again. Once it's stopped, and you'll see, what's the difference? The dead body has all the functions, all the features of the live body. Especially if a child is stillborn or something like that, it has all the same capacity in terms of the mechanical function or the arrangements of the body. It's all there, but it's not working. What's the difference? The scientist doesn't understand that because of lack of education. They think they're so educated because educated in this modern world just means, dealing with matter. But they think they're so educated, but they don't understand, as Prabhupada says, this simple fact that you're not the body, you're the spirit soul. And as Prabhupada said, this is a simple fact, but it is not understood unless one is spiritually educated. Kashyapa Muni met his wife, Aditi, in the heavenly planets. But the same misconception extends throughout the entire universe and is also here on earth. So even the devatas are, experiencing the same misconception that I am this material body. There are different grades of living entities, but all of them are more or less under the impression of the bodily concept of life. In other words, all living entities in this material world are more or less devoid of spiritual education. The Vedic civilization, however, is based on spiritual education. And spiritual education is the special basis on which the Bhagavad Gita was spoken to Arjuna. It's interesting here that Srila Prabhupada is pointing out this, how everyone's more or less devoid of spiritual education. Has anyone ever had the experience of when you're trying to preach to someone, you quote the Bhagavad Gita and they go, oh, yes, I am knowing Bhagavad Gita? You ever had that experience? No? Never? Yeah, but actually, do they know the Bhagavad Gita? They may know the name, they may know what the book looks like, but do they understand the content of the Bhagavad Gita? Because what's the first instruction in the Bhagavad Gita? The first thing that Krishna tells to Arjuna. Chapter 2. Huh? You're not the body. That's the first thing he says, and then practically the whole of chapter 2 is dealing with this simple understanding that you're not the body. And if you actually know the Bhagavad Gita, then you would know this simple instruction. But how many people do we come across who understand this point, that I'm not the body? We're all caught up in this misconception because we lack spiritual education. And this is the point of Bhagavad Gita, is to educate us. Not so much for Arjuna, because for Arjuna, he already understood this fact. Just Krishna put him into illusion temporarily so that he could present the Bhagavad Gita. So more or less, we're all deluded by this fact in this material world. Therefore, our concept of education means to learn how to make cars and phones and computers and spaceships, and that's what if you can make a lot of money, you're considered to be very well educated. But if you understand the nature of the self, well, that's useless, at least from the material perception. What's the use of that education? So they have no understanding of what real education means. Real education means to understand the self, to understand the nature of the self, to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to understand the nature of this material world and how these things interact or should interact. This is real education. And this is what the Bhagavad Gita focuses on. As we know, the Bhagavad Gita has 5 topics: Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala, and Karma. And the interaction of these different things. But for the modern person, this education is useless because it won't feed me. It won't put food on the table, it won't pay my bills. It just goes to show how faithless they are. Because we all understand that if we have faith in Krishna, if we surrender to Krishna, he'll take care. We don't have to worry about these things, that Krishna takes care and the arrangements are made. And so modern education is actually failing society because it's not actually giving society what society needs. Society needs to understand, who am I? This is like the first question one needs to understand or to get answered is, who am I? Because I don't understand what's going on in this material world. I don't understand why I'm suffering. What's the cause of this suffering? And we see that people, when they suffer, what do? They blame somebody else. They rarely will take responsibility for their suffering. Oh no, it's because they did it to me. And then what happens is this mentality of retribution comes about. Because so-and-so did this, therefore I'm suffering, I'm going to pay them back. They should suffer also because of what they've done to me. But very rare you'll see that someone actually understands karma. In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna instructed Arjuna to understand that the spirit soul is different from the body. Dehina swim jata dehe komaram yovaram jara tata dehantara prapti diras tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. So, very, very important understanding that Krishna is giving in this verse. And we see when people die in this material world, how many people are lamenting the loss of that body? How many people are lamenting? There's so many. Everyone practically laments. Oh, I've lost my father. I've lost my mother. They're gone. But Prabhupada would say, but where are the person you've identified, the thing you've identified as being your relative, is lying there right in front of you. What have you lost? Because they don't understand the self. They don't understand that the self is not this material body. Because the thing they've identified with all these years as being their dearly beloved relative is still lying there. It's just not animated anymore. Now, again, Prabhupada says, unfortunately, this spiritual education is completely absent from modern human civilization. No one understands his real self-interest, which lies with the spirit soul, not with the material body. Education means spiritual education. To work hard in the bodily conception of life without spiritual education is to live like an animal. Nayam deho deha bhajam niloke kastan karman ahate vidbhujamye. This is from Lord Rishabhadev's teaching to his sons. People are working so hard simply for bodily comforts without education regarding the spirit soul. Thus they are living in a very risky civilization, for it is a fact that the spirit soul has to transmigrate from one body to another. Tata dehantara praptir. Without spiritual education, people are kept in dark ignorance and do not know what will happen to them after the annihilation of the present body. They are working blindly, and blind leaders are directing them. Andayatandai upaniyamanas te pisha tantram uri damnibadha. Bhagavatam 7.5.31. A foolish person does not know that he is completely under the bondage of material nature, and that after death, material nature will impose upon him a certain type of body, which he will have to accept. You can't say, no, I don't want this body. I don't like, the nose. I don't like this. I don't like that. It's not like you go down to the supermarket and you want to get some sort of food or something, and you can go through and you can pick out, oh, I don't like these apples because they don't look red enough or whatever. It's not like that. Due to guna, according to guna and karma, one is forced, and this is described by Kapila Dev to his mother, that one is forced to enter the womb of a woman to assume a particular type of body, according to guna and karma. So by our activities in this life, we determine where we're going to go in our next life. But this science, as Prabhupada is saying, this science is not understood in this material world. People do not understand how this is working. And therefore they lament their situation, they blame somebody else. Why am I suffering like this? And this is why it's so important for us to be actively propagating this knowledge of Krishna consciousness. So very, very important. They are working blindly, and blind leaders are directing them. Andandai yatandai upaniyamanas te pisham tantri urudam nibadha. A foolish person does not know that he is completely under bondage of material nature, and that after death, material nature will impose upon him a certain type of body, which he will have to accept. He does not know that although in his present body he may be a very important man, he may next get the body of an animal or a tree because of his ignorant activities in the modes of material nature. Therefore, the Krishna conscious movement is trying to give the true light of spiritual existence to all living entities. This movement is not very difficult to understand, and people must take advantage of it, for it will save them from the risky life of irresponsibility. So what is this risky life? What's the risk in this life if we don't follow the spiritual process? Prabhupada explains it in the Gita, that in our next life we'll take an animal birth. And so there's a very powerful purport where Srila Prabhupada is explaining the situation of the living entities in this material world. Because of ignorance, there's a vidya. The living entity is thinking that I am this body, not understanding the true nature of the self. And we see, it's a very simple, Prabhupada's saying here, it's not very difficult to understand this, you just require a little bit of intelligence. But because the living entity's intelligence is clouded over by material desires, is clouded over by this misunderstanding of thinking I'm the material body, they cannot understand. And this Prabhupada's quoting the last half of that verse from the Bhagavatam, which says, Na te vidu svatakatim hi vishnum. Na te vidu, do not know. They cannot know the true nature of the self. Why? Because their aspiration, their endeavor, their desire is to enjoy the senses. And as long as the living entity is hell-bent on sense gratification, they will never understand. Mati Krishna paratos utova mitopi bijeta grihavartanam adantako vishatam mishram puna punas chavita chavananam. It says, Mati Krishna. They won't know Krishna. They can't understand Krishna by their own endeavor, by the endeavor of others, or by a combination of the two. Because again, the same point is they're hell-bent on sense gratification. Therefore, they're just like hogs and dogs, they're repeatedly chewing that which has already been chewed. They're trying to find enjoyment in the material nature. And so many people in the past have tried to find that same enjoyment and haven't found it. Yet, because of ignorance, they think that this is the place for satisfaction. But an intelligent person understands, as Lord Chaitanya has given the analogy, he says, this material world is like a ditch in which people pass stool. It's a very, very unpleasant place. And all you have to do is just go around with your eyes open and you'll see how difficult life is in this material world, how much we suffer in this material world due to the interactions of the modes of material nature and the senses, etc. How difficult it is in this material world. But if we can understand, as Prabhupada says, this simple science, he says here in the last sentence, this movement is not very difficult to understand. It's simple to understand what this movement is about. This movement is about spreading Krishna consciousness. It's about giving the conditioned living entity the opportunity to understand, who am I? Because this is a really important understanding. As I mentioned, is everyone's thinking that what's important in this material world is the acts of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and how to facilitate this in a better way. So I can, eat more comfortably, I can eat better foods, I can eat more opulent foods, I can eat more nicely, I can sleep in a very comfortable way. I can mate in a very wonderful way with a very beautiful partner and enjoy sex, profusely, etc., etc. All these types of things. And defending, that I can defend myself very, very wonderfully so I don't get hurt but the other person gets obliterated. This is just animal activities. I was quoting this verse yesterday from the Hitapadesh, where it describes this how does it go? I've forgotten the verse now. Ahara nidabaya maitaram samanya etat pashapi. No. Ahara nidabaya maitaram cha. Anyhow, it says dhamma. Yeah. Basically what's saying, the activities of eating, sleeping, mating, defending are common to both men and animals. But the special quality of a human being is dharma. This is the thing that separates, and it should separate a human being from an animal. But if a human being doesn't practice dharma, pashubi samana, he's the same as an animal. Because the animals don't practice dharma. And if we don't understand what the human form of life is meant for, then we're actually living an animal life. And this is why this Krishna consciousness movement is so important, because it's about giving people this knowledge of who am I, what is my duty in this material world. And we have coming up, I think it's starting in a few days' time, actually it's starting today, I think, the Christmas marathon. And there's these wonderful piles of books out there in that gazebo out the back there. And each one of those books contains this knowledge of Krishna consciousness. If someone gets one of those books and reads this knowledge, it will change their life, because they'll start to understand who they are. They'll start to understand what is the purpose of my existence. It's not simply about eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And you'll see in this material society, they put so much endeavor, they spend so much time in these things, these simple animal activities of eating, sleeping, mating, defending. We all have to do it, but we don't have to make that much endeavor, because these things will come automatically. We don't have to make so much endeavor for eating, sleeping, mating, defending. But because living entities are bewildered, they think this is the activity I should follow. This is my only activity. So this is why the Krishna conscious movement is so important, because it helps them to understand what is the purpose of life. Why am I here in this material world? It helps them understand the cycle of karma, helps them understand the nature of the body, helps them understand the nature of the soul, and most importantly, the nature of Krishna and our relationship. So this is a wonderful time of year, because as we know, people are more in the mood of going out and spending and buying things, and and you'll see that, like I think Black Friday was last Friday, and there's so many people in the town and they want to buy this, they want to buy that because they get the sales and things like that. But it also gives them the opportunity, and this is something that was started in the 70s, this Christmas marathon, and it really gives people the opportunity to change their life, to actually come to the point of understanding who they are and what is the point of their life. So, as much as you can, try to get involved in this Christmas marathon, and distribute books in whatever way you can, and help the people in this city help their lives to become auspicious. All right, finish it there. Any questions at all? Yeah. So here in the material world, our form is composed of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. They're the gross and the subtle elements, but also he, the self, is there as well. There's those 9 elements. In the spiritual world, there's just there's just the self. And that spiritual form is there. In the spiritual world, the form of the self is non-different. Yeah? So what you see is the self, not this covering. Because what you're experiencing here in the material world is the covering, meaning the subtle body, mind, intelligence, false ego, and the gross body, earth, water, fire, air, ether. Yeah? So it's like when you're taking off the covering and you see the original self. But that's not so manifest here in this material world. It's there, but it's covered. Yeah? Does that answer your question? When you get there, tell me about it. Yeah? Send me an email. Anything else? Yeah, this Krishna consciousness movement is so important. We cannot really overestimate how important this movement is, because it's the only thing that will help people to understand who they are. There's an interesting purport in the Bhagavatam where Prabhupada explains that anyone who thinks they can make advancement in this world outside the Krishna consciousness movement is living the greatest hallucination. Because coming into contact with Krishna, especially something like the Hare Krishna movement or ISKCON, whatever you want to call it, where people get the pure message. You know, Prabhupada, he deliberately called his Bhagavad Gita the Bhagavad Gita as it is, because he's delivering the message of Krishna as it was spoken by Krishna. He's not changing it. You'll find that other spiritual organizations, they tend to modify the message to some extent. Therefore, it's very difficult for people to understand what the situation is in this material world. But when they come into contact with Srila Prabhupada's books, and we're very fortunate that Srila Prabhupada made such an endeavor to give us this transcendental knowledge. I mean, he really extended himself. And he, wrote these books, had the books published, etc. like that, in order to help us to rectify our ignorance, to overcome this ignorance and to understand. But not just us, but for everyone. I think it's the introduction of one of the books, I can't remember which book it is, where Prabhupada mentions, he says that this Krishna consciousness movement is meant to liberate the people of the entire universe. Not just this one small planet, but he wanted everyone in the universe to go back to Godhead. This is the mood of a devotee. So this is a great opportunity for us to try to give Krishna consciousness to as many people as we can. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hare Krishna.